Hey guys, it's Blue, and I'm going to run through Yugi's deck from Pyramid of Light. So, we're doing all the decks from Pyramid of Light, and it's really cool. And, of course, all of them are, I think, really good versions of the characters' decks. Yugi, like Kaiba, is very much based off Battle City, and I think the deck looks and feels Yugi with a couple new inclusions. So, these decks were the easiest to build. Because some of the easiest, because even though not every card was played in a movie by them, their deck lists of Yugi, Kaiba, and Pegasus were all published with the novelization. So there exists a complete deck list for all the characters, despite whatever was absent in the actual movie. So this deck is just going completely off the list. It does feature, of course, our own erratas, 2 additional cards, actually, but not really. So, I'm going to go through it again. The list is there, so you can always find it, but we'll do it anyway, because again, we throw in some more stuff. So, first up is, of course, Dark Magician. Gemini Elf was a new inclusion to his deck. So, Spellcaster. 1900 makes it one of Yugi's strongest monsters that he has in any of his decks. Usually those 1900s are lurking in Kaiba's deck. Yugi's monsters are more effect-based or defensive. 1900, but Jack's Knight is a tribute. So, I know, same attack, but an extra tribute is just not worth it. Queen's Knight. So, as we saw, the knights were helpful in summoning Obelisk for him. Of course, not every card is printed. Yugi is missing only a few cards, one of which is Reverse of Reverse, the card which helped him take Kaiba's Return from Different Dimension, but he still has a 40-card deck without it. So, Big Shield Guard now. Dark Magician Girl. King's Knight. Now, in the movie, Yugi special summons King's Knight via the effect of Familiar Knight, which triggers his effect and summons up Jack's Knight. Now, this version, our version we've been using, doesn't have the special summon, only normal summon. That's a change we did not feel was super necessary to make, although it would give King's Knight much more flexibility. Up until this point, it's been as the printed text was, and even though it's kind of a bummer that it doesn't have the special summon effect, well, when he's special summoned, you get the effect. It's not a change we felt was really necessary to make. We try to keep most of our ratas to when cards effect differ greatly in that the printed version has extra effects that are more of a competitive edge, or our version lacks effects that were key. Karibo, Magician of Faith, so that's a newer one for Yugi. We've seen it a little bit in a couple decks, but never in Yugi's. Magician's Valkyria, and yes, that's listed as 2 copies. So again, any doubles in these or any of the decks are based on what the lists say. So Magician's Valkyria was a new monster that we saw for Yugi. It's I liked the card a lot. It was really cool when it came out. So it's obviously it's Dark Magician Girl's character with new colors, different effect and stats, but it's the same kind of character as Dark Magician Girl. Great effect, and we saw Yugi pull this out with Mage Power to really boost it up to attack Blue Eye. Next up is Morphing Jar. Not one that we saw played in the anime, and not a card we see very often in the anime itself. But it's listed in Yugi's thing. It's an interesting choice. I mean, it's a great card because, it's a hand reset. But not the most Yugi card. Then, of course, Obelisk the Tormentor. Obnoxious Celtic Guard. Skilled Dark Magician. So, again, a new card that Yugi threw and we hadn't seen before in his deck. So, going back to, here's another monster with 1900 attack Yugi has. Again, it was listed in 2 copies, so. But definitely great for Dark Magician because this deck has more ways to get out Dark Magician. So, Skilled Dark Magician really comes into play for that. Slifer, which was a more recent errata, not something that we had a long time ago. Um, the thing we've changed for him is just that his effect to destroy monsters targets. That was critical because that's what made the magnet combo from the last duel in the anime. That's what made that work. Was that the attack targeted, the magnet cards activated, and the cycle began. So that's one of the changes we made, so that that combo, which was very essential, we could pull off the same thing, because otherwise it doesn't work, and then our games will kind of lack the element of the key strategy in the anime, and our cards don't have that. So next card is definitely brand new for the movie, because it came out in the movie pack. Because that was great about the movie. There were some promo cards when you saw the movie. There was a little pack that came out. Not a lot of cards, but definitely some new cards that was great. So this is the Sorcerer of Dark Magic. So it's really cool. It's obviously based off the art for Dark Magician, with an upgraded scepter, more of a cape, and a couple other changes. But, you know, got the hat thing going on, Dark Magician's hat. So, Sorcerer of Dark Magic was really instrumental for Yugi, coming with more attack than a Blue Eyes, but very specific summoning conditions of 2 level 6 or higher monsters. And the ability to negate the effects of traps. However, in the anime, it could also reduce the attack of an opponent's monster based on the number of soul cards. Ours does not have that, and Delta and I did not feel, even though that was actually important, that was not important enough to make the change, because that was not a critical combo that we felt. It was more of a helpful ability to progress the duel. But Blue Eyes Shining is something we did change because it was missing its destruction effect, which was absolutely key in the game. Swift Gaia the Fierce Knight. So special summon, and you know, one of the big end-alls of the deck is the Winged Dragon of Ra, and of course its 2 pieces. So Sphere Mode and Phoenix Mode were not listed in the deck list for Yugi's deck, but they're also not really separate cards. They're not even listed in any of the decks, really, if you look at any deck list on the wiki or anything, because if you don't know, I mean, they really are sub-effects of the original Winged Dragon of Ra. So by listing Ra in anyone's deck, the effects of these 2 cards are implied there, or are listed there. So whenever we include Ra, we include these pieces because it's, in the anime, it was all one cohesive card. So we treat it as such. These 2 were great inclusions, by the way, you know, because they really make Ra more flexible and give it the abilities that it needs to be this ultimate monster that it was portrayed. Because the god monsters in the anime were held at a very supreme status, but still among them, Ra was still in another class above them. So we've changed the way Ra is, and we use all the originals of the gods. We do have, of course, the ones with printed effects, but for that authenticity that they did have the colors in the anime, we were using the original prints. So, and actually I do have one of the worded ones right here. So what the Ra errata is that it's the tributed to get the attack points of the tributed monsters. That's not in the printed version. Also, the printed version cannot be special summoned. Now, the new cards, Sphere Mode and Immortal Phoenix, do say that they can summon Ra and get around that. But that doesn't help the fact when Ra could be special summoned by Monster Reborn, which Merrick had done as a one-off to get Ra, give it some attack points. So we let Ra be special summoned under any condition, but if Ra is special summoned in ways that are not Sphere Mode, it is destroyed at the end of the turn, like the anime. If it's summoned by Sphere Mode, it's here to stay, and then Sphere Mode's effect still applies, giving 4,000 attack. So it's a little bit convoluted, you know, maybe overall. Again, these are all listed in our document, and Ra is an older errata. It's not something that's new, but I want to touch on it because it's a little bit convoluted because it's one errata for the main card, but there's 3 cards in total that work together. But overall, when you look at everything, the point is it plays so much like the anime. You contribute, it gets you attack points. You still can pay down to 100. We didn't make it a variable amount. We didn't make it down to 1. We left it at 100 because it's not too much of an issue. And then Phoenix Mode and Sphere Mode really bring it together. It was a very wholesome feel of Raw that you can see everything. And we did see Phoenix Mode in the anime. It doesn't really do much other than kind of be there. But we still do see it. So that's Raw and the Raw pieces. Next up is Wadapon. So even though we've already seen it in his Waking the Dragons deck, its first inclusion was in the movie. And, you know, kind of helpful, cute little thing. You can special summon it. Not an effect that we see come off too often, though, because the chances of really getting it out without a searcher are very slim. And here's an interesting one we didn't see Yugi play, but it was in his deck list, and I'm not really sure why, but it's kind of a cool inclusion, though, is Zambira the Dark. So 4 stars, 2100, making it Yugi's strongest monster, I'd say. That is a normal summon with 4 less stars and being the highest stack points. Of course, it does have a minor decay effect, so it loses 200 attack when it attacks, and it cannot attack directly. But this can definitely get over just about anything of Kaiba's deck of his monsters, or his Vorse Raider, or anything like that that Kaiba just outright summons. All of Kaiba's beaters are still weaker than Zambira. And that's the monster lineup. So again, everything is the same ratio as it's listed, but the inclusion of the Raw pieces because they would be part of Raw's effect, which was held at 1 card. So Dark Magic Curtain, one of our older changes, basically just works like the anime. Either player can use the effect and summon Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl, because the way they printed it, you can't do what happened in the anime, which was kind of a critical thing. It's how Yugi ended up winning, was using the effect of Dark Magic Curtain. So, the change we made. And it's something that's been working out great. Especially because a lot of his opponents can't use it anyway. It's really more so that in our Arcana vs. Yugi duel, we can have that moment. Otherwise, it still just works for Yugi. So, Diffusion Wave Motion, more Dark Magician support, Double Spell came in really handy in that game. Actually, what's funny is if you watch the movie, he has Diffusion Wave Motion and Exchange in his hand, but then he activates Double Spell and discards Exchange, so kind of a little bit of a slip up there. Not that it really matters, it's just a fun fact. There's Exchange. Fiend Sanctuary, so that's a card he got from Kaiba in Battle City after he beats Kaiba for his duel with Merrick. So it's nice to see that it came back. Mage Power, as I mentioned, used it to really boost Magician's Valkyria. Magical Dimension. Monster Reborn. Multiply. Again, one of our older errats we did a long time ago. Even though it's almost exclusively used with Karibo, Multiply had the ability to make the token copies of a Fiend monster that had low attack. So Karibo, of course, applies, being a 300 attack Fiend, but Yugi used it in the duel against Merrick. After Yugi had been given Fiend Sanctuary, he used Multiply with it to get enough monsters to tribute to summon the Egyptian god. So we want to make that change. So even though we very rarely see a duel where Yugi has both cards, because it's not in his Battle City deck, unless he's performing certain duels. It's set up that you could do that down the road, but it's not something we see very often. Again, we still want to put that change in there, so at a later point it can happen. Pot of Greed. Premature Burial. Sage's Stone. So we saw this a lot with Teia's Virtual Roll deck, and it's in Yugi's movie deck. So he uses it in the movie, and it's one of the cards that, again, helps get out Dark Magician more, which makes some of his support cards more live, and then makes Source of Dark Magic easier to summon. Yugi's Swords of Revealing Light, which he almost always has had. Thousand Knives. So we see he did pick up cards from Arcana, Thousand Knives, Dark Magic Curtain, in other of his decks, Dark Renewals. After the duel with Arcana, we start seeing those kinds of cards in his deck. And then that's it for the spell lineup. So it's card for card. Traps, Dust Tornado, Mirror Force, Ultimate Offering, and unfortunately, again, there is no reverse of reverse, which is, Yugi's key card into, winning in the end. So that's Yugi's deck from Pyramid of Light, and this goes with the rest of the Pyramid of Light decks. There's not something we're not going to use here very often, but with Dark Side Dimensions coming out, we definitely want to make sure that we have the original movie decks out as well, because some people asked for them. And we had planned to do them actually a while before, but we filled it with other space with other content, so it pushed it back. But we figured doing it still alongside the new movie, kind of to get all the movie stuff out there, all the original anime-related movies. So we're really happy with the decks. They've been kind of something we've had sitting around for a while because the deck lists were just so easy to get. There was no deciding of, what to include or anything like that. So, really cool deck. Again, definitely feels a lot like Yugi, with, I think, a little bit better of an edge than some of the other Yugi decks that we saw from the anime. So, as always, stay tuned for more content, more decks, more duels, more of everything you guys love. See ya.